next hour, we're going to talk about sailing in heavy weather. We'll look at boat handling, sail trim, steering, personal protection, and storm tactics. We'll be using a fin keel, spade rudder, moderate displacement boat equipped with a roller reefing system. Heavy weather sailing is a subject of real interest for most good sailors. We'll meet and hear from some of them during the next hour. Warren Lures, John Neal, John Jourdain, Neil Pride, Patrick Adams, Steve Dashew, Steve Taft, David Kennedy, Mike Plant, Tim Uria, Olaf Harkin, and our crew for the offshore segments, Zan Drages, Liz Bayless, Alan Little. Together, we'll look at how to actively sail in heavy weather conditions and some of the control techniques that help make it safe and fun.
Hello, I'm Mark Schrader. As race director for the BOC Challenge Round the World Yacht Race and a sailing competitor, I've developed a natural interest in heavy weather at sea. As a competitive sailor, I've seen a generation of ocean racing sailboats redefine our idea of what a seaworthy boat is. These boats have, in turn, changed the type of yachts the average person buys today. The boat that dominates the market today is fin-keeled, has a spade rudder, and is of moderate to light displacement. This makes them fast and responsive, but these characteristics demand more of sailors when the weather turns bad. Most of our knowledge about sailing in heavy weather was developed in older boat designs, much different from modern designs. We need to update and evaluate heavy weather boat handling and storm tactics for the type of boat people are sailing today.
Regardless of the vessel, heavy weather is a test of the sailor, who must adjust from the world of normal sailing to a world of extremes. The first extreme is the sheer power of the wind. Wind forces don't just grow proportionally as wind speed increases. The actual force of the wind grows much faster than wind speed. For instance, a doubling of wind speed from 15 knots to 30 knots actually quadruples the wind's power. Those forces mean that everything bad is exaggerated. The boat is harder to control. When it goes out of control, it does so faster and more violently. Equipment breaks more often, usually at the worst time with the worst consequences. Heeling, a comfort factor in better conditions, becomes a control factor. And sailing under control is the key to handling heavy weather.
You cause damage to the boat if you aren't sailing in control. If you have too much sail area up, the boat is going to knock down, it's going to broach, it's going to break gear, it's going to hurt people. So you always want to have the boat in control. And the key is to not have up too much sail area. And that really depends on the individual person. It's how comfortable you are with the boat, how comfortable you are as a sailor, how comfortable your crew is with dealing with it. In the Whitbread, we carried spinnakers in 50 knots of wind, and 50-foot seas, and we were surfing at 32 knots of boat speed, but it's a whole different thing. We had 18 professional America's Cup sailors aboard.
Whether you're sailing shorthanded or with a full crew, the basics are the same. Shortening sail remains the fundamental heavy weather tactic. When sails are shortened, heeling is controlled in two ways. The sail plan's center of effort is lowered. The total force on the boat is reduced by giving the wind less surface on which to push.
We're going to take a boat, typical of modern yacht design, off California's northern coast to demonstrate techniques and tactics for sailing these boats in heavy weather conditions. Our crew will be short-handed because racing sailors seem to be the only ones with the luxury of a full crew. Most cruisers and people making offshore passages are usually short-handed.
About half the time we're under control here, but the other half of the time we're putting that rail solidly in the water. And I'm having to put a lot of weather helm on here to keep the boat sailing in the line. Every once in a while when a gust hits us, you can feel the boat go over even further, and she starts trying to round up. So I think now, rather than later, would be a good time to throw a reef in here. Oh, get the boat back on her feet and sailing well. I'll have a lot more comfortable ride.
Reefing the mainsail is one of the most basic tasks a sailor learns. But in the kind of weather that requires a second reef, it may not seem so basic. The best advice about reefing: if you think you need a reef, you probably do. Go ahead and tug it in. You can always shake it out if you're wrong, but 9 times out of 10, your first instinct will be right. Reefing will move the center of effort down and reduce side forces. The boat will sail flatter, faster, and with less weather helm. There are no set wind speeds when it's time to reef. Every boat is a little different, but a good indicator is the angle of heel and weather helm. If you're heeling more than 25 degrees with the leeward rail in the water and fighting weather helm to control the boat, it's definitely time to shorten sail.
By the time you're thinking about a second reef, chances are the conditions have gotten a bit worse, and that is the wind's picked up or the seas have picked up or both. And it's very important to talk about what you're going to do before you leave the cockpit. Obviously you want to spend as little time as possible up forward, and it's important to get organized, discuss what you're going to do, and make sure you have everything you need before you go forward. Sometimes you want to slow the boat down a little bit for your reef. You don't want the boat charging along at 9 knots while the crew's up forward trying to put in a reef. You might want to ask the helmsman just to feather the boat a little bit, slow it down, and once everybody's organized and knows what they're going to do, go ahead and start your reef. Just like the first reef, we're going to have to let the luff get the tack secured and the luff of the sail tensioned before we go ahead and get the clew secured. It's important to try and keep the slack out of the clew lines in order that they don't get fouled in the middle of your reef. Ready, Liz?
Ready?
Okay. All right. If the left is not tight, the left of the sail, and you start tensioning the clew, all the load's going to be on these slides here, and you're going to rip the sail or pull these slides right out of the mast. So make absolutely clear to whoever's helping you that the tack is secure before they start winding on the clew of the sail.
A good helmsman can make reefing easier and safer. Head up a little. By feathering slightly, you can flatten the boat out. When the reef is complete and you're ready to put in the ties, head downwind. Bring the main in towards center. The crew will have a much more stable working platform. This requires a good helmsman. The last thing you want is an accidental jibe while the crew are clinging to the boom. Never take any load on the reef point pringles or the ties. These are for collecting and controlling the extra material. Use a good slip knot that will be easy to untie when you're ready to shake the reef out. Remember to take out all the ties. An overside here is a sure way to rip the sail in heavy conditions.
It's very important once you have your reef ties in that you have some sort of a backup line for your reef line. If the reef's going to be in for any length of time, you run the risk of breaking this reef line, in which case your mainsail is going to be ripped in 3 places here where your reef ties are. So this line, or any big line that you can put through the clew of your reef, a line big enough to take the load if for any reason this reef tie should explode or even come loose. You tie this as tight as you can. Sometimes it's even desirable to slack a little bit of the pressure off of the reef line so that this line and your reef line can share the load equally. It will also help add to the longevity of your reef lines.
In heavy weather, you should go ahead and rig the third reef line at the same time you actually take the second reef. Most sailboats have only 2 reefing lines rigged. This means that the line for the first reef must be re-rigged to serve for the third reef. The reefing line is pulled up and through the third reef kringle by a messenger line that is permanently rigged between the second and third reef kringles. This process usually requires preparing the reefing line in advance with a Flemish eye, or loop of light line which attaches to the messenger line. Rigging the third reef line early may seem like unnecessary work, but by the time conditions require a third reef, doing this work will be much harder and more dangerous.
Heavy weather sailing is about just that, sailing. In my 2 circumnavigations, I've encountered survival conditions only once. That's true for most sailors. In 99% of the heavy weather conditions, the wind and the seas allow you to go in a direction you want to go. The sails are the engine and the horsepower of the boat, and it's important to know how to use them, particularly in a shortened or reefed configuration. Getting a boat to perform in heavy weather, as in more moderate conditions, is a matter of sail trim, sail management, balance, and control.
Assuming a reefed mainsail doesn't need much trim is a mistake often made when the wind picks up. It is definitely not a case of set it and forget it.
Trimming the reefed mainsail is crucial to boat balance. It's really like a giant rudder. If you've got weather helm, you want to depower the main. And if you've got lee helm, you want to put more power on the main to keep the boat balanced and then tracking in the right direction. There are 2 ways of achieving mainsail trim in heavy weather. That's either with a lot of sheet tension and travel her down, or travel her up and ease the main sheet to create twist. The conditions you'd use either of those are depending on the waves. If it's smooth water, you want to use a scenario with the tight leech and traveler down. You are able to let the traveler down because in this type of wind strength, the roller flowing jib will have been rolled up, opening the slot and allowing it without backwinding the main. But when you get into big waves, going over waves where the wind increases at the top of the wave and lulls below, it's very difficult to balance the boat with a tight leached mainsail. So here you should use the main sheet, develop twist in the main, pull the traveler up, and balance the boat that way.
So to get this main trimmed properly, what we're going to need to do is pull some more main sheet on to get the leech tighter. The easiest way to pull more main sheet on is to let your traveler down a little bit and then wind on your main. And then you pull the traveler up and then see how the boat balances. So how's it feel, Alan?
Feels pretty good.
Okay. And then if everything feels all right, we might want a little more leash tension on to get the little less twist, because the boat seems to balance all right. And to get more leech tension and less twist, you pull the main sheet on a little more.
Head sails provide the other half of the boat's horsepower, but these sails can be a real handful for a short-handed crew in a fresh breeze. In an effort to make life a little easier and safer, roller reefing headsail systems have been developed. Many single-handed ocean racers have embraced this technology for its obvious labor-saving benefits. But more importantly, the systems have become the market standard for medium and large sailboats. Sailors are going to use roller reefing systems in heavy weather, so it's important they know how to use them correctly.
When you're talking about shortening head sails in heavy weather, it's important to make the distinction between a reefing system and a furling system. The reefing system allows you to effectively use a partially rolled up sail, while a furling system is just a way of storing a sail in a rolled up condition. A true reefing system enhances the sail shape by taking some of the draft out of the center. This requires a robust system that won't twist and can take the loads of a reefed sail, and a system that incorporates an independent swivel at the head and the tack. These allow you to roll up the center of the sail before the ends are rolled up, thereby flattening the sail. In heavy weather, the main advantage for the crew is that they don't have to leave the cockpit. This prevents you from having to wrestle a jib and a rolling pitching deck. The other advantage is that particularly for the short-handed crews, that the stress and exhaustion of wrestling sails is greatly reduced. The design of a roller reefing system is really critical. These are mechanical systems, and they got to operate under thousands of pounds of load. It's vital that you use one that is designed and built to work when the conditions are really difficult. It's also important to check the system just as you would your rigging. It's very important to tension the jib halyard just correctly in a roller reefing system. If you over-tension it, it puts extra load on the bearings and the system won't furl easily. If you under-tension it, you'll have wrinkles in the jib. It's also important to keep a little bit of tension on the sheet when furling to ensure you get a nice, tight, and neat wrap. Again, over-tensioning will make furling difficult. Finally, it's important to check a system if it does not want to furl. This you have to do in any kind of weather. Don't just put it on a winch and force the unit. This can cause severe damage to the system and prevent it from furling at all. Usually the problem is obvious and can be easily corrected.
Roller reefing sails work very well these days, now that the systems to reef them have been developed and the sails have been developed to suit those systems. Nowadays, some of the better furling systems have independent swivels at the tack, which allows the belly of the sail to be taken out of the sail as you roll it up. And the sails now are built with what you call luff foams. This tends to build up the middle of the forestay or headstay so that it's thicker than the top and the bottom of the headstay. So as you roll the sail up, it takes more fabric out of the sail in the middle and flattens the sail. This is key when you're going for reefing in heavy winds.
Okay, yeah, let's make it as easy as possible. Okay, I'm going to ease the jib a bit.
And in those strong winds, reefing the headsail will take some crew coordination. The helmsman should bring the boat into the wind a little as the sheet is eased and the sail is rolled up. To get the right sheeting angle, it's important to move the lead cars forward when the sail is reefed. Rigging a system that allows the cars to be moved by a line led to the cockpit makes the job easier and safer.
Okay, now that we've rolled this sail up, we got to figure out how to trim it right, because as you roll it up, the clew of the sail gets higher and higher, so you end up sailing then with the sail that's the same as any other jib, except for you have a very high clew and a higher tack. And also when you look at the sail, it has lots of wrinkles in it. But don't worry about that. What you want to do is trim it just like any other sail. You get your lead right so that the top and the bottom of the sail are evenly distributed. If you had telltales, they'd be breaking evenly, but you want to have your load so that the top of your sail is not flogging away in this bottom strap. You want the sail to have an equal shape. So by moving the lead forward, you tighten your leech a little, keep the bottom full. If you moved it back, you'd end up with a very flat bottom, flat foot, and a very loose, an open leech. So you want to have a balance in between those two. And then once you get your lead right, you want to trim it in. And when you trim it in, you have to think about the balance between your mainsail and your jib. And the jib is going to be keeping your bow down and keep you powering through those waves. So if you're in really big waves, you need to have a fairly full sail to keep the boat driving.
The way a sail is made is never more important than in heavy weather conditions. Sails should be able to take a real beating without significant damage. The sail's failure in heavy conditions can cause some serious problems. But if you keep an eye out for chafe and small rips, you can usually avoid a shredded sail. Flogging is another sure sail killer. A sail flogging in 40+ knot winds will not only shorten its life, but will destroy it within a short period of time.
Heavy weather is the ultimate test for sails. If they're going to break down, that's when they're going to break down. So when you're building sails for heavy weather, there are certain things that you really got to make sure are correct. You've got to make sure that the stitching's strong enough. In most cases, that means at least triple rows of stitching. It means that the reinforcement patches in the corners should radiate deep enough into the sail to distribute the loads from the corners into the body of the sail. You have to ensure that the cloth weight itself is going to be heavy enough to withstand the loadings in the heavy air loadings. And one key item is that you need to have a leech line on any heavy weather sail, because if the sail starts to flog, that's the first way that the material will start breaking down.
Controlling sails and reducing flogging can be a challenge in a fresh breeze. A full batten mainsail can be a real advantage. Not only do full-length battens quiet the sail and add to its life, They help maintain effective shape in heavy winds, making it easier to get the proper trim. It's important to have sails that are not only strongly built, but that will maintain good shape when shortened down. Remember, the goal is to balance the boat and keep it moving forward, not sideways. Raising and lowering a full batten main can sometimes be a problem if they're not fitted with special slides at the mast. These bat slides take the compression load from the battens and allow the sail to slide freely.
With all the emphasis on shortening sail in heavy weather, it would be easy to think of the wind as the major concern, but it's the seas, particularly breaking waves, that can cause the problems. The art of boat handling in heavy weather involves knowing how to work the boat through the waves. And until you do it, it's hard to comprehend how much concentration, fast reaction, and just sheer hard work this kind of steering requires.
The key to upwind steering is, again, balance. You need enough drive to move through the large seas and the right sail combination and trim to balance the helm, giving maximum control.
Well, the first thing you have to do when sailing a boat up the wind in heavy conditions is to get a feel for the seas that you're sailing in and to try and get the boat into a motion that's consistent with the seas. If you try slugging into some big waves, you're going to wind up losing. I've seen it in conditions on boats where the boat was extremely difficult to sail, and the problem was that we didn't have enough sail area up on the boat to make the boat move fast enough so that it wasn't being thrown around by the seas. And once we realized that and shook a reef out of the main and got the boat balanced, then the motion of the boat was very, very nice. Although the first reaction is that when you get into heavy seas and moderately heavy air, the first thing you wind up doing is taking sail off the boat. That's not correct. You really have to balance the two of them out and figure out which is going to make your boat go best in those conditions.
In 35 knots of true wind with higher gusts and building seas, the conditions were perfect for Zan Dryjas to demonstrate upwind steering, but far from perfect for our camera crew.
Big wave, wet one. There's no reason why sailing upwind in 35 has to be any more difficult than sailing upwind in 25. As long as you shorten sail enough, the boat's basically going to be behaving similarly. The waves are going to be a bit bigger, obviously, and it is going to be wetter. Ideally, you want to achieve a reasonable angle of heel and be able to keep enough boat speed to sail through the waves. You're not going to be able to point as high into the wind, and generally speaking, you're going to have to take your foot off the gas just a little bit in order to make it comfortable for your crew. One of the problems you may run into is on the tops of the swells, you're going to experience quite a bit more wind than you will down in the troughs. There's really not a lot you can do about this. But as you come up the face of the swell, the boat will start to get knocked down, and the boat will want to head up naturally. And you want to kind of allow the boat to do this and sail a nice S, sort of an S. Basically, the boat's going to find a groove that it can sail in. As long as the sails are balanced and your helm, you don't have a lot of weather helm or lee helm, you're going to be sailing just slightly off the wind than you would normally, a little bit lower and a little bit slower. Important to maintain enough speed that the waves, the larger waves, aren't going to be knocking you off your course. You want to keep an eye out for those really big waves and anticipate their arrival. You may want to crack off slightly and get a little speed before they arrive, or try and get around them, depending on how actively you're able to sail with your crew. But generally speaking, you're going to have to take your foot off the gas a little bit, make sure your sails are reefed down enough to where the boat's riding fairly comfortably at a reasonable angle of heel, and yet you still have enough power to be able to maneuver in the larger waves. So as you come up the face of the wave, it's important to keep enough speed that you can come up the face, and as you get to the top, steer up over the top, and then back down over the windward side of the wave. You want to keep your foot off the gas enough to where you're not launching off the tops of the waves, but you still need to maintain enough speed to where you can power out of the bottom of that trough in the lighter wind with your reefed down sails and have the ability to steer up as the wave approaches a bow.
Maneuvering around breaking crests and taking waves bow on is the goal. Be careful not to stall the boat by pinching too much as you head up. Then drive off down the backside, looking ahead to pick your spot on the next wave. Try to find a flat spot to tack in, then drive off to build up speed before heading back up. Unlike going to weather, sailing downwind in heavy air can really be fun, as long as you're in control of the boat. Boats with modern underbodies are capable of surfing well beyond hull speed and being easily controlled. That control is a matter of sail balance and how your boat handles in the conditions. Most modern boats are stable and easier to steer at higher speed, and that downwind speed comes from surfing on waves.
Well, we got some pretty good waves right here, and luckily they're all from pretty much the same direction. Sometimes you might get one or two big waves, directions crossing each other, and it makes life a little more complicated. What we're doing right here is as the stern of the boat gets lifted up by the wave, we want to put just as she starts to lift up the stern, we want to square the boat off perpendicular to the wave, put the stern square into the wave, and let the boat start sliding down the face of the wave. And just before she starts to slow down, you want to head back up just a little bit towards a broad reach and get ready for the next wave to come up behind you. Here we go. Head up just a little bit there. And get ready for the next wave. Ideally, as the boat starts to surf, you want as little turn in the wheel as possible. You should have the boat aimed straight down the face and just kind of let her take off and straighten it out and come up slowly as the boat starts to slow down and get ready for the next wave behind you.
A good helmsman is concentrating on more than just steering.
The helmsman is concentrating always on the feel of the boat to make sure, in the case of running downwind or before the storm, that he's not going to broach the boat. He's constantly looking at the sheets, he's looking at the rigging, he's looking for any telltale signs that something on the boat is going to give out.
When learning to steer in heavy seas, it is important for a helmsman to visualize a larger seascape upon which he can move. The ranks of waves are not continuous or uniform. Crests will break on parts of some waves and not on others. The helmsman's job is to pick a path that avoids